And together, we will move mountains. And if they don't hear our message, then we'll just do it over and over and over and over 1,000 times again for you.
And I'll rise up, I'll rise like the day, I'll rise up in spite of the end. I will rise, we will rise, we will rise, we will rise.
Hello, my name is Michelle Zabel and my pronouns are she and her. I'm an assistant dean at the University of Maryland School of Social Work and the proud director of the Institute for Innovation and Implementation. Today, I'm just delighted to welcome you to this Training Institute live workshop. As you might have come to expect with all your favorite conferences, the Training Institutes are now virtual. And although I know we'd all like to be together in person, we are excited to host the virtual Training Institutes and really want to encourage you to continue to join us on the first Thursday of every month through August. Each month, you'll have a choice of 2 back-to-back workshops. So mark your calendars, choose your workshops, and make sure you reserve your place early so that you can attend the workshop that most interests you. Today, I want to encourage you to actively participate by using the chat to post your questions, post your comments, and share your resources with your colleagues. Our presenters, they definitely want to hear from you. And it is absolutely your participation that will make each of these sessions a success. As a reminder, staff are monitoring the chat and they're going to make sure the facilitators see your questions and comments, so be sure and engage. A few other reminders to include: if you need assistance at any time navigating through these virtual spaces or accessing links to workshops, we do have a live help desk support standing by to assist. We are also providing a certificate of attendance after the completion of each workshop, and all of our workshops are being recorded, so by you participating, you're implying consent. Finally, there will be an ASL interpreter or closed captioning available during each workshop. Those interpreters can be pinned when available for those who require interpretation by hovering over the interpreter's video and selecting the 3 dots. One of the options that will appear is pin video. By selecting the pin video, this video will not move out of view. With our theme, What Could Be? Bolder Systems and Brighter Futures for Children, Youth, Young Adults, and Their Families, all of our sessions will challenge us to envision a future where the voices of children, youth, young adults, and their families are elevated, especially those who are most frequently silenced or marginalized, where we use the best data and research available to challenge ourselves, developing new ideas and approaches that can be implemented to meet the needs of youth and families, and in service of our commitment to social justice and the elimination of disproportionality and disparities. My hope is that today's session will provide you with food for thought as you consider your next steps in creating a vibrant, equitable future for youth with complex needs and their families. Please don't forget to register for next month's workshop. Remember, they're held the first Thursday of every month, and you can visit theinstitute.umaryland.edu for the full schedule.
Good afternoon. Welcome everyone to today's Training Institute's live workshop, Operationalizing the System of Care Approach in Juvenile Justice, Partnerships with Youth and Families. Throughout today's session, we encourage you to use the chat box to comment, share ideas and resources, and note any questions you have for us as the presenters for the Q&A period that follows the presentation. My name is Millie Sweeney, and I serve as the Deputy Director for FREDLA, the family-run Executive Director Leadership Association. FREDLA is an association of family-run organizations across the nation that are committed to children's mental health. And all of FREDLA staff are parents of children and youth with emotional and behavioral challenges. FREDLA is also a member in National Technical Assistance Centers that offer support, training, and technical assistance in the area of family engagement, family-driven care, parent peer support, and more across all the systems that serve children and families. Co-presenting today are colleagues from Tennessee and from Arizona, and they are an amazing group of presenters with a wealth of knowledge, experience, and commitment to children and families with juvenile justice involvement. Elizabeth Setti-Reeve is the Director of Juvenile Justice Programming for the Tennessee Department of Mental Health and Substance Use Services. And she is joined by the Honorable Sheila Calloway of Davidson County Juvenile Court and Khaki Reynolds of Knox County Safe Baby Courts. Momi Howard of the Family Involvement Center and Amy Stemke of the Superior Court of Arizona in Maricopa County are joining us from Phoenix, Arizona. The system of care approach focuses on partnering with families at all levels and across all systems for better outcomes for children and youth with emotional and behavioral challenges. For the juvenile justice system, there are multiple benefits of employing this approach. Research from sites focused on building collaborative systems of care have shown that this approach results in children and families and youth being diverted from the juvenile justice system whenever possible, usually through early identification and intervention, and the use of innovative programs that targeted the underlying issues that lead to court involvement and to delinquency. System of care data show decreased recidivism and decreased interaction with law enforcement, with juvenile arrests falling by more than half. Using this approach leads to better outcomes for children and youth, including reduction in suspensions and expulsions from school that can lead to juvenile court involvement, and improvement in emotional and behavioral health. When you apply these principles and values of the system of care philosophy in your role, there are amazing results. How to do this requires that juvenile court systems consider their processes, that they examine their interactions with youth and families, and that they be willing to innovate alongside the families they encounter. Juvenile courts and their staff have a clear mission to uphold the law, protect the community, and rehabilitate youth. Their daily realities often go beyond just legal mandates, but may include limited resources, high caseloads, and work-related trauma. Most staff training, especially in detention facilities, seems to be based on a corrections model. And every day, they see youth and families who are experiencing some of the worst points in their lives, struggling with unknown or unmet needs, emotional and behavioral challenges, and more. But I want to point out that there are other realities for them as well. Juvenile court staff play a vital role in the lives of the youth and families that are entering the juvenile justice system. And they have opportunities to positively impact and change lives based on their approach and actions. Staff may have clearly defined roles, but there is flexibility in how they approach that role and in setting the tone of their interactions with both youth and their families. There are also community partners willing to collaborate with the court in supporting youth and families. When you build collaborative relationships with other agencies, with professionals, and with families, which is a core tenet in the system of care approach, it becomes easier to make referrals, access information and assistance, and jointly identify needs and solutions. So let's consider for a moment some of the realities of the families that are entering the doors of the court. When many families reach the juvenile justice system, they're in crisis. Most families are unfamiliar with what to expect and are not provided essential information about the process. So the likelihood of their cooperating and participating in the process and effectively being able to advocate for their child is low. Juvenile justice system staff often don't understand the perspective of the family and may not know how to effectively engage families as partners. In addition, the juvenile justice system often intimidates families, especially if they're unfamiliar with the system and anxious about the future of their child. Even the youth may put on a tough face, but they're often frightened of their situation along with their parents. Families report that they lack knowledge, that they don't know where to turn. They feel overwhelmed and often disregarded. Court staff are likely seeing families during one of the worst times of their lives. They're stressed and they're concerned about their situations. Many of the youth and families are dealing with multi-stressed environments, meaning that they're under consistent, unrelenting sources of stress from different areas. And the court system, let's be honest, is complicated, and it speaks a different language that they don't know. As a result, families whose youth are involved in juvenile justice are often viewed as uninterested, as inept, or disengaged, when truly that's not the case. To facilitate their involvement, families need information. They need training. They need support at all stages of their child's experience with the juvenile justice system. In one study, 86% of families expressed interest in being more involved in their children's treatment while youth were incarcerated. Yet many are really uncertain of their role. It's vital to develop multifaceted ways to share information, to support families in problem solving, and connect them with resources and support. For positive outcomes for youth, you must engage their families. So how do you do this? It's really all in your approach, individually, at the court level, and at the system level. You may have legal mandates, but there's flexibility in how you approach families. Effective family engagement starts with understanding and respecting their culture, their experiences, and the situation that they're in. Clarifying roles and expectations. That includes providing information about how the court functions, what to expect, and sharing both those spoken and unspoken rules of being involved in the court system. It means being honest and positive in both verbal and nonverbal communications with the family. Be transparent, but don't necessarily be harsh. Letting go of assumptions and misperceptions about families, meeting them where they are, looking for those strengths, not just the needs. It's not just what you do, but it's really how you do it that makes a difference. There are lots of strategies that you can employ. We're going to hear about some innovations today from our other presenters, but here are some of the strategies to try. First of all, invite families in. In communities with high rates of justice system contact, which disproportionately include communities of color and communities with high rates of poverty, members are often excluded both from policy conversation and budget lines associated with justice and safety. This constitutes a missed opportunity, as the people closest to public safety challenges have critical perspectives and insights with which to inform the development of effective solutions. Giving youth and their families a seat at the table may also lead to more expansive and creative investment strategies. Develop, implement, and expand youth and family-driven policies, systems, and practices, and establish methods for gathering input from youth and families, an advisory council, focus groups, surveys, discussion groups, and then use it to inform your work, your policies, and your practice. Another area is staff training. Offer staff training on effective family engagement and especially trauma-informed care. It's your approach with families that will make the difference, and it's this training that will help with that approach. Employ targeted programs, policies, and special dockets. For example, a one family, one court type approach, where one judge or a magistrate oversees all cases involving a family to ensure continuity and to grasp the full picture of their situation. Or have special dockets that address targeted needs, truancy court, drug court, safe babies court, that you'll hear about today. Invest in community-based youth justice solutions. Effective approaches minimize justice system exposure, divert youth from formal system involvement whenever possible, strictly limit out-of-home placement to only those most serious cases, and connect youth with resources, services, and support in their own communities. For those who do require targeted intervention for harmful behavior, research has shown that community-based options are generally more effective than incarceration in reducing reoffending. Although incarceration disconnects youth from critical family and social supports, interferes with pro-social development, and does a poor job of preventing reoffending, community-based programs that meet youth needs, build critical skills, and promote positive development can more effectively get youth back on track to successful adulthood. One example of such program was the Just Care 180 program in Memphis, Tennessee, targeting Memphis zip codes with the highest rates of juvenile justice involvement. It employed a system of care approach. It employed a family support provider and a community development coordinator. And using that approach, targeting young people who were at risk at ages 12, 13, and 14 going into court, they were able to have an outcome of 10% recidivism in an area where kids were consistently going into the court system and staying. Another strategy is cross-system collaboration. Partner with community-based organizations and family-run organizations to build a support continuum for families. Look at the needs behind the behavior and build relationships with agencies that can meet those needs. While many traditional efforts to promote safety and stability for youth have focused on programs and services, some youth emphasize the importance of drawing a more direct connection between meeting basic needs and broader safety and stability. Parent peer support is a very effective strategy. It can provide a substantial positive impact. Key elements of family peer support include advocacy, education, training, and peer-to-peer support, usually offered by another parent with lived experience in caring for a child with behavioral health needs. This support is most effective when the family support specialist who provides the support has direct experience in the specific systems impacting the parent receiving support. In this case, juvenile justice, child welfare, and mental health. Research shows that family peer support can increase satisfaction, knowledge, self-efficacy, and even hope and a focus on increasing parent skills so that parents can better help their child, and it makes an impact. By changing the culture of court processes and allowing the voices of children and families to be heard in meaningful ways, systems who embrace these or similar changes can assist families in having an increased sense of control over their futures and ultimately improved outcomes for families involved in system care. Let's now take a look at some of how these strategies are being implemented. We're going to start by hearing from Tennessee and strategies at the state, court, and program levels, followed by innovative partnering with juvenile justice in Arizona by the Family Involvement Center. I'd like to introduce Elizabeth Reeve, the Director of Juvenile Justice Programming at the Tennessee Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services. Elizabeth is not only a lawyer and a director at the state level, she's also a parent. Elizabeth?
Thank you, Millie. You stole all my lines. Thanks for that great lead in. Good afternoon, everybody. I am with Tennessee, the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services, and our department has a rich history in system of care initiatives that we have helped implement SOC sites across the state. We administer the Certified Family Support Specialist Program. We fund a program placing family support specialists in juvenile courts. And as of 2018, and because of all of those initiatives, we now administer the juvenile justice diversion programs through our department. Next. So as I said, in 2018, we looked a lot into what was going on in our state and what was going on in juvenile justice systems, and did a lot of work in surveying folks and finding out what the needs were. And one of the biggest needs that we found was that courts and serving their children, there just weren't enough services provided. So the legislature at that time decided to set aside $4.5 million to increase those services, and our department administered those funds. Those funds provide services in 91 of our 95 counties, and they are administered by 6 providers across the state. Millie mentioned earlier flexibility. It's a word that I use a lot. In keeping flexibility in mind, we didn't prescribe what providers needed to do. We asked them to come to us and suggest what they wanted to do. And so among those 6 providers, they're doing 6 different things. All of them are involved in the courts. They're involved in schools. Most importantly, they're meeting the families where they are. They are all community-based services. Next, as I get ahead of myself. So in looking at those community-based services, it wasn't so much that there weren't services available, but there weren't services that were available for people to utilize, looking at barriers such as transportation, funding, and whatnot. And so we requested that the people who the providers that propose their ideas, that they really stick to providing those services in the community. So all 6 of those providers, like I said, have an array of services that they provide, but one of the tenets that they all stick to is that they are going out to the families where they are. They're meeting them at home. They're in juvenile court. They're going to schools, as much as they can in the past year, of course. And so, sorry, excuse me. The services provided are evidence-based, outcomes-oriented. Millie also mentioned the recidivism. That's one of the goals that we look at, is reducing that recidivism, following up with families at 3, 6, and 12 months. And proud to say that since the inception of our program, have served well over 1,000 families with about 90% success rate at keeping youth at home with their families with no further charges and no further out-of-home placements. Next, our targeted population, we really wanted to try to address the needs of youth who had that initial touch with juvenile court. And so we really wanted to be as diversionary as possible. And so a lot of the youth that we see are kids who are struggling with truancy, unruly kids who have been deemed unruly. I try to be careful with my language, sorry. And so youth that are that initial touch into juvenile court, and we're most of the programs, if not all, in fact, I believe, all, are in the courts during those delinquent dockets. They're receiving those referrals as those kids are coming through. They're trying to go ahead and get those intakes done so that we're not losing touch with the families. And we're getting those things started immediately upon that docket. We see a lot of pretrial diversion so that the kids can complete the programs and then hopefully just go on back home and go on their merry ways. We work a lot with the Department of Children's Services. They're one of our referrers. Our largest referrals are from juvenile court, and the majority of the kids that we're seeing haven't even gotten into the involvement with the DCS yet, which has been great. Next. And then here we have our goals that we've really focused on in the past 2.5 years. Really, number one goal being that diversion, so that they never really fully enter into the system. Through the use of those community-based services, Millie had mentioned one of the things that's really important is training. So we've, in addition to providing those direct services, all of our providers have some sort of training, whether they are training court staff, school staff, families, they have groups. And so it's really that the education is key in trying to combat those referrals. And then, of course, ensuring the resiliency, well-being, and overall connectedness to the community for those juvenile justice involved youth. Next. And like I said, the services are a wide array. We've really capitalized on our building strong brains and working with ACEs. Sorry. But the services are anywhere from kind of case management, intensive family therapy. If the services that are being provided by the provider are not intensive enough, they can be there's also an avenue for them to be referred to other programs as well. And then upon discharge, they work with the families to make sure that they have what they need and moving forward so that their success can remain. Next. And then, of course, our partners. I'd mentioned the Department of Children's Services. The Administrative Office of the Courts is also another huge partner. They're kind of the touch into the courts. The courts themselves, and you're going to hear from one in just a moment, have been just paramount in the success of this program, because without them, they wouldn't be making the referrals and we wouldn't be able to help the youth and families that we've been able to assist. Community agencies, of course, the stakeholders beyond the providers. Transportation has been great. The Tennessee Commission on Children and Youth here in Tennessee has also just been an amazing partner. And then, of course, the greatest partner that we have is our youth and families. And I am going to turn it over to Judge Calloway now.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I've had an absolutely joyous time to be able to work with Elizabeth for since we were both babies. We're only 20 now, and so we've been working together at least 20 years. So it's been a joy. And I just want to say it has been my experience as the juvenile court judge. I was appointed to be, I was elected to be the juvenile court judge in 2014. And since that time, it has been an effort to truly make sure that we are a trauma-informed juvenile court from the ground up. Next. And, one of the things that when I came into the job, I was in juvenile court many years before I became elected as a judge. First, as a public defender representing those youth who were charged with crimes. And then as one of the juvenile court magistrates, who I was appointed by the elected judge at the time to hear some of the cases. And so then when I came into the job of the judge, I knew what the history of the juvenile court looked like, at least in Tennessee. And I knew that there were a lot of fear and a lot of misperceptions about juvenile court and about what we did and the things that go on in our system. And so the question became is how can we change a system like the juvenile court system, which has traditionally been driven by fear and misperceptions, into a trauma-informed system by making policy changes. And one of the things that I appreciate about the statutes in Tennessee is that it really does give me the authority as the judge to make policy decisions about how we run our court system, as long as I can justify that it's always in the best interest of our children. And so that is what we have constantly done. And so next, the thing that we started off with saying is that there has to be a role for honesty and transparency throughout. And so as a juvenile court, we had to be honest and transparent about the things that we didn't do so well. And sometimes there were questions, legitimate questions about safety for our community. There were legitimate questions about, are we really doing what's best? Are we using evidence-based resources? What are we doing with the resources that we have? And so we had to step back and be transparent about the things that we needed help with. But in the same time, we also pushed our community, our partners, our churches, our nonprofit organizations, our leaders in the community, our police, our school system, to be transparent as well. The job of changing the policies and making our youth number one and making this a trauma-informed system can't just fall on the court alone. There has to be community involvement. And as Millie said earlier, and by the way, I do think that Millie stole everything that I had written down and used it. And so now I'm like, what do I say next? Thanks, Millie. But, we have to make sure that we are pulling in every part of the community, from the youth that are involved, from their parents, from the school teachers, from the principals, from the police, and everyone, so that we are truly making changes. So next, what I like to say and how we built our juvenile court to be more trauma-informed is we start with our 3 foundations, that it is our responsibility to prevent problems from happening. It is also our responsibility to promote the positive potential of everyone that we see, not just our youth, their families, our staff. Everyone has that positive potential deep, deep, deep down inside of them. And most of them, it's not really deep at all. It's right on that surface. But we just have to make sure that we are allowing their positive potential to be promoted at every turn. And most importantly, that we do this with a sense of, we pursue fairness and hope. The one thing that I always remember when I was campaigning to be the juvenile court judge is how people perceived the court system as super being unfair. And then how children that come into the court system have absolutely no hope for their future, no hope for that particular court session, no hope in general. And so we had to concentrate on truly changing what it meant to have fairness and hope in a justice system. So next, we decided we were going to do this brick by brick. And we're going to start from the ground up and build it on up. And so the first brick that we took was, when I came into office, was making sure that every single staff member knew what their strengths were, knew what their passions were, and that their role in their job fit their strengths and their passions. And I'll tell you, some staff, after they discovered their strengths and their passions, decided maybe juvenile court wasn't for them. And so we did have some staff turnover. But the majority of the people who worked here could identify, yes, this is what I love to do. This is what makes me happy. This is my strength. This is the area that I want to work for. And we were able to align or realign our staff to make sure that their passions and their strengths were being addressed. And so the next bricks that we talked about is we had to make sure that our hiring and our promotion practices were fair and transparent. We had to make sure that we were maximizing the government pay scale to the best ability, that everyone felt that it was fair and that they had a fair shot of either having a promotion or getting a raise. We needed to create more opportunities for advancement. When I started, it was just 2 levels. It was like you were a probation number 1 or you're a probation number 2. And that was it. And if no one died or retired from that probation 2 spot, you would never get a raise, or you would never be able to get promoted into those spots. And so we had to creatively think of ways that we could advance all of our staff on a timely basis in a fair manner. We wanted to make sure that all of our employees felt like they were protected by civil service rules. There were certain ones by Metro government that were already going to be protected. But we had a lot of grant employees that felt like if they did anything wrong, then all of a sudden they could lose their job. And so we extended civil service protections to them as well. And we made sure that we were doing fair employment policies. We made a new policy book to make sure that everybody and all the policies were spelled out and everybody understood it. And it was administered fairly, and that we made sure that our work conditions were conducive for what their jobs were being asked. And we also wanted to make sure that if there were any employee conflicts or a need for employee discipline, that we did it in a quick and fair manner, and that everyone felt like everyone was going to be treated in the same way. And so next, our next layer of bricks that we wanted to make sure that we were doing is just generally our support for our staff. And so we wanted people to feel comfortable to come to us with any personnel situations, such as if they were having housing issues or a family crisis or a health issue, and not make it something that they had to hide and deal with themselves on top of the trauma that they're dealing with the families and children and families that we serve, but that they could address their issues in a manner that would not in any way harm them, further harm them or traumatize them. We wanted to make sure that if employees needed a safe space, some type of accommodations based on whatever it was that they had, that we were positive, encouraging, and making it a norm and not an exception to the workspace. And we allow any employee that needs the employee assistance program, that needs to talk to someone, that needs outside counseling, we allow them to do that as part of their job. That's not like sick time that they have to take in order to go speak with someone. That's part of your job. That's part of the thing that we have to deal with on a regular basis. And self-care is extremely important in these areas. And so those are the things that we did. Furthermore, our next bricks, we wanted to make sure that we were doing team building for the entire team. And so each division of our court has activities that they do. They do fun activities. I do a newsletter that recognizes everybody for what they've done, the above and beyond. We also, for instance, we do a lot of celebrations and court-wide projects. We are at the end of our annual Biggest Loser contest. Unfortunately, I don't think I won. However, I did lose some weight, but not enough. But, and we will celebrate our Biggest Loser winners with a staff appreciation lunch that we will have in a couple of weeks. So we eat, we lose it all, and then we gain it back in one luncheon. And that's our goal. But it's things that will make them feel comfortable in their workspace. And then what Millie was talking about earlier, and what Elizabeth and her group do, we do a lot of training. All of our staff members, from our warrant officers, our detention facility officers, my secretary, and everybody receives training on adverse childhood experiences, trauma-informed care, implicit bias, LGBTQ issues. They all participated in a poverty simulation twice, the power of calm, and motivational interviewing. And then our probation staff did extra training on educational advocacy, principles of effective intervention, and cognitive interaction skills. And so they are learning how to interact and connect and talk to the people that we're serving and each other. And it also, the next bricks that we talk about have to do with who we select to be a part of the juvenile court, because it takes a lot of patience, kindness, empathy to be a juvenile court employee. And so we were making sure that we're picking the right people who have that emotional intelligence and understand the traumatic nature of the jobs and the importance of self-care, who are mature and open and affirming and compassionate and have empathy and can combine that with good boundaries, have that empathy, but not go home with or take every child home with them every night. And understanding what the backgrounds of our children look like and their families, and definitely to understanding ACEs and trauma. We had an opportunity next to partner with the Family Center in Nashville to make a to build that trauma-informed court. And the vision was to have a trauma-informed juvenile court that identifies individuals who have experienced trauma, ensures the provision of appropriate intervention services, and improves the health and well-being of youth families, staff, and national community. And we did this as systems. It wasn't just juvenile home employees, but it was the public defender, the district attorneys, some of the magistrates participated, our probation staff, some of our community partners, all were part of building this trauma-informed vision for our court. Then we also, as Millie said, was one of the strategies. We have so many specialty courts, and we're proud of them all. We have a recovery courts for both the family treatment team as well as our juvenile recovery court. We have a child protective investigation team court that deals with children who have dealt with sex abuse. We have our Safe Babies Court. We have a parental assistance court docket for those cases in our parentage divisions that are working to eliminate any barriers that any parent, the non-custodial parent, may have with spending more time with their family and their children. We have our GRIP court. It's our gang resistance and intervention program that works directly with those youth who have been identified by the police department as gang affiliated. Though we have a special court for them to help them to learn how to get out of gangs, and or at least if they can't get out of the gang safely, how to at least not participate in the gang behavior. We have a Metro Student Attendance Center that works with all of our anything with the schools. They are designated to that. We have a youth court program it's going to be in all of the high schools, but it's in 7 of the high schools this year. And our restorative justice program, that is a pre-diversion program that keeps the cases out of juvenile court and puts them with a community-based organization. We know that building our community next and engaging the community is so important. So we have a DP2 program, diversion program, partnership program, where we work with different community partners in order for them to give all of our children and our families the support that they need, the holistic needs, the housing, mental health, safety, well-being, behavioral health, educational attainment, all of that goes to them and not the court. And so the good news next is that since we have done all of these things, crime has gone down significantly in Davidson County. Since, according to the police stats, since 2013, the number of youth who have been arrested has decreased to 48%. If we go to the next slide, you will see that in 2013, there were over 4,715 youth that were arrested. And then in 2019, that number dropped to 2,431. The numbers for 2020 are even more staggering, but COVID had a lot to do with that. So we can't claim necessarily all of that, but when everybody was locked up and locked in, nobody got arrested, which was a good thing. But our numbers now literally are about 60% decrease. What we know is that juvenile court can't do it alone, as we are transparent, and we know that. It takes a village to do that. And that's our children, our parents, our schools, our community, our police, and our service providers. And we have started to change our court to be a more trauma-informed court. So thank you for your time, and I will turn it over to Kaki at this time.
Thank you so much, Judge Calloway, and thank you guys for being here today. I am here to share just a little bit about our Safe Baby Court in Knox County. There are 12 Safe Baby Courts across the state of Tennessee. And this is a specialty court for children under 3 years old that have been placed away from their parents. And ultimately, the main goals of Safe Baby Court are to help the child reach permanency faster and to reduce the risk of future maltreatment. We do that in a lot of different ways. Another unique aspect of Safe Baby Court is not just on the child level to reach those two goals, but we really want to help inform new practices in child welfare that better meet the needs of this young population. So a part of my job is helping children reach permanency, but another part is working to change the day-to-day practices that we have in our community that might not support infant mental health or relationship-based child welfare. And really, a lot of our cases are drug-exposed infants or toddlers that have been involved in a home where there's been substance abuse. And so we're dealing with really the implications of addiction on a daily basis and how that impacts this really young population of children. And people say that the opposite of addiction is community, and that's really what we're trying to help our families develop. Judge Calloway mentioned that it takes a village to raise a child, and we talk about that all the time in Safe Baby Court. Sadly, a lot of the families that we're working with are coming to us kind of on an island with a bunch of people that aren't supporting them or their children in healthy ways. And so we work through Safe Baby Court to build that village around those parents and to really engage our community and community partners to be a part of that village for each family. Next. Judge Calloway talked a lot about delinquency, and obviously she's got a lot going on in her court. When I tell people that I work at Safe Baby Court, their eyes kind of go up and they say, well, what could a baby could have possibly done to be in court? What are you doing every day? And I think people are surprised when they're not involved in child welfare to hear about what infants and toddlers in child welfare are facing. So the number of infants and toddlers entering foster care across the country is far higher than any other age group from birth to 18. And when you look at ACEs and the impact that trauma has on little brains, it's significant. And if we don't help those children that have already had traumatic experiences get on the right track, they're going to face those challenges for the rest of their lives. So there really is a benefit to society intervening with these children much earlier than waiting until they're in adolescence. Next. So the Safe Baby Court model was developed by 0 to 3, which is a national resource center that supports all children getting a healthy start in life. And one great thing about Safe Baby Courts across the country is that we all function within a framework. We've got components that we try to implement into our practices. But each court is unique, and we tailor our court processes to the needs of our specific communities. So for example, in Tennessee, we're the first state in the country that is implementing the Safe Baby Court model for children that aren't necessarily in foster care. And some courts across our state are implementing Safe Baby Court practices for children that have remained with their birth families. So on the left side of this slide, you can see the state requirements. There has to be a child under 3 in the family unit. The parents have to voluntarily agree to be a part of the court docket. And obviously the juvenile court has to have jurisdiction over that child and that family. In Knox County specifically, we've implemented some additional criteria. We found when we were getting started that we have a lot of people that meet those basic requirements. We have a capacity of 20 families to be served at any given time. And so we tried to narrow our scope to help us find more success as we were kind of getting into the Safe Baby Court waters. So we are only working with children that have been placed away from their parents. So they're placed within the foster care system or in relative placements with grandparents, aunts, uncles, things like that. All of our participants live in Knox County, and we are not working with families where there's active domestic violence between the parties. Next. So the core components of Safe Baby Court are infant mental health, intergenerational trauma, family engagement, and team collaboration. And as Millie suggested at the start, these are the components that really inform our approach in Safe Baby Court. We're looking and looking at practices and services that are trauma informed for all of our families. We have infant mental health specialists and assessments involved on all of our children to make sure that they're forming attachments with their caregivers. And as we move towards reunification, that the transition of that attachment from a foster parent goes smoothly with the birth family. And really at the heart of what we're doing in Safe Baby Court is the relationship. It's that family engagement and team collaboration. We work with our families to just be real with them. We see them a lot. We are talking to them a lot, and we want to create that safe space where they can tell us what's going well, and more importantly, what is not going well, and how can we help them get on track to meet the needs of their children long term. Next. So these are kind of the nuts and bolts of Safe Baby Court. Our cases initiate with a willing and motivated parent who's committed to the hard work that it's going to take to regain custody of their child. So permanency is the ultimate goal. So that isn't always going to be reunification, but that's our primary goal from day one. We really want to rally support and services around birth families to reunify if that is at all possible. So once a parent engages, they're met with a team of professionals to help support them on their journey. This team includes attorneys, child welfare workers, therapists, case managers, child development specialists, peer support specialists. I mean, we come to a child and family team meeting, and especially over Zoom now, sometimes it's worse than the Brady Bunch. Like, our teams are big, it can be overwhelming, but it also helps when we have our monthly child and family team meetings or our monthly court hearings. There's almost always someone at the table that can help find a solution to whatever barrier is being brought up, whether that's transportation or trying to find that perfect provider to meet that parent's need. We kind of joke, there are no bad questions, and there are no solutions that are too crazy to put on the table. We might not be able to do it, but if there's a way, we're certainly going to try it. In addition to those points of contacts in family team meetings and court hearings, we have a lot of services involved. As I mentioned, a majority of our parents are knee deep in substance abuse and mental health issues. So right off the bat, we're getting drug and alcohol assessments, mental health assessments, generally within a week of the child being removed from their care. And then we're getting those services in place to meet those needs just as quickly as possible. We've got home visitors. We're checking up on our parents on a regular basis. They joke with us, like, my knock is worse than a cop knock when I show up at their door. Like, they know that we're going to be with them, walking alongside them. We trust what they're saying, but we want to verify the progress that they're telling us that they're making. Another big aspect of Safe Baby Court is parent-child contact. In the state of Tennessee, children in foster care have a base 4.3 hours of visitation per month. So all of our families are going to at least get that. But as we all know, often the child welfare system is overloaded, and 4.3 hours of visitation between an infant and a parent is like the blink of an eye. And so we find ourselves really trying to push through, engage community partners, engage foster parents to find ways to increase that time between a parent and a child. We find also that with those opportunities for increased visitation, it helps our parents stay well. They have that motivation more when they're seeing every other day that their child is connecting with them and bonding with them. And then we've got a lot of just tangible support that we're able to offer our families. And that's awarded to us through our grant through the Department of Children's Services. We've, got access to bus cards, Uber cards, gas cards to help with transportation. If a parent is struggling because they've cut hours so they can make it to their treatment, we might help with rent payments or car payments. We've helped families with dental work when their teeth were so damaged and it was causing significant pain, to help keep them in recovery. We've paid for people to have teeth extractions and dentures. So there really is nothing that is out of the realm that we won't, again, at least try to provide our parents in helping them be successful. Next. And we do a lot of this through partnerships. So I want to put this a little bit in context by sharing a story of a family that we served in Safe Baby Court. The mother's name was Abby. She was in her early 30s when she and her boyfriend got pregnant with their baby, Nicole. Abby had grown up in and out of foster care. She was the victim of extensive trauma throughout her childhood and early adulthood. She lost custody of an older child 10 years previously who was adopted. She'd spent time in prison and violated probation following a robbery charge. She was selling drugs out of a hotel room throughout most of her pregnancy. And as she got closer to delivery, she realized it was time to get help. And at that time, she moved into a rehabilitation center for pregnant and parenting mothers. When the baby was born, she couldn't take the child home, and she was placed in foster care. So I think she made a really hard decision at that point and stayed in her facility with all of these other parenting moms. She stayed put and she focused, she hunkered down, she got clean. As we progressed through her case, we helped her get a Section 8 voucher. We helped her get a job. The child's father ended up getting engaged. We helped him seek housing through a partnership with our community law office. We had a bunch of her charges expunged. She was able to get a driver's license, a car. Dad ended up going to our local technical college and got a degree in collision repair. So it really was comprehensive, the way that we worked with this family. Ultimately, the family reunified, and it's really special. The foster family is really now embraced the birth family, and their whole kind of village, like I said in the beginning, is completely different than the day that they walked into court. Next. These are just a couple of our outcomes. We've served 75 children in Safe Baby Court, totaling 44 families. 56% of them have reunified and 28% have been placed in relative placements. For comparison, for children in foster care in Knox County, 69% of our children reunified with parents. And in 2019 and 2020, in Knox County, only 29% of children in foster care reunified. We've had 5 adoptions thus far, and almost all of them have been resulted from surrendering. So parents surrendering their rights. And again, a lot of that I think comes back to just recognizing their needs and recognizing that their children are in safe and stable places with foster homes. So that's another aspect that we're really proud of. Next, I have a quote here from the mom. I think we're running short on time, so I'm going to pass it on over to Momi. And thank you guys for your time.
Hey, thank you so much. All that information was amazing. I'm always just amazed and delighted to see all the different states and how much they're really out there supporting all the families and especially the youth. And it just gives me excited to see how many good positive outcomes we're having. So like, you know, everyone said, my name is Momi Howard and I work at the Family Involvement Center, and we are a nonprofit family run of our board of directors have personal experience in navigating the behavioral health system with their own families and their own children, or they're a caregiver that they've experienced issues with the behavioral health system. 95% of our staff have experience as parents or the primary caregivers of children who are currently or have been in the behavioral health system. And I'd like to expand on that a little bit. The Family Involvement Center began initially by helping parents and caregivers navigate through the behavioral health systems. But what we quickly realized was that a lot of these families that we support have more than one need. They may need assistance and support navigating multiple juvenile systems, such as the educational system, medical system, development of disabilities, the behavioral health, child protective services, and yes, even juvenile probation. So of those 95% of our staff, not all of them have experience with the behavioral health system. some might have experience in the other youth serving systems. And that makes us uniquely different than a lot of family-run organizations, because we can help support parents that come in for any need that they may have for their families. Next. So our approach is to establish authentic connections with the parent-to-parent support. And because of this, we're able to build that trust with the parents that come to us. We can instill hope. A lot of parents who come in feel very overwhelmed, very shamed, and they feel like there's nowhere to go and they don't know how to climb out of this hole that their family has fallen into. And so we can help motivate these families by just sharing our journeys and letting them know, hey, you're not alone. We've been there, we've done that, we've all made it through, and you can too. And by doing all this, we can cultivate meaningful relationships with the families, but not only just the families, but with the stakeholders. We can help cultivate those relationships with the judges, the attorneys, the CASAs, anyone that this family needs to work with. We can help build those relationships up to have a successful professional working relationship. Next. Some of the historical barriers that we found with the families in the juvenile justice is that sometimes the people who worked in the court systems felt that maybe the parents were to blame, maybe that the children that are coming into the system didn't have enough parent guidance, or the parents didn't know what they were doing, or that if the parents were involved in the process, they could also be a distraction or an added burden. And this is not the case. But the parents on the flip side also thought that they were being blamed and shamed, and that everybody in the system thought they were bad parents, and that their family expertise was not encouraged or needed, and that everybody else knew better than them. And none of these are true. These are all myths, but they are barriers that our families have felt like they experienced in the past. Next. Some of the reports and information that we found was that 85% of the families that were responding to surveys about the juvenile justice system thought that if they were provided with a peer parent support, then they would have a better understanding of the court system, and they'd have a significant improvement in the outcome of the cases for their children. Next. So what our peer parent support workers do is they are parents who have journeyed through these various juvenile systems with their children and their families. In some of these cases, their children may have been detained, or maybe the peer parent may have lost their children or had them placed in DCS custody themselves. These are the experiences that our peer parents can support other parents with on their similar journeys. Our peer parents receive training and ongoing mentoring and coaching. Next. So what our peer parents do is we engage the family by sharing our common journeys. We do a lot of training on when it's appropriate to share your journey and what parts of it are appropriate. We also build those bridges between the families and the stakeholders, and we provide education, empowerment, encouragement, and engagement with these families. Next. So the biggest thing that our peer parents do is they inspire hope with the families that we work with. Like I said, a lot of the times when their children have been arrested or they go into the juvenile justice system, it's hard for these parents to understand the system and know what comes next and know how to even help their children and their families. So we inspire that hope and let them know that, hey, you know what? It's going to be okay. We're going to work through this together, and there is a light at the end of the tunnel. We help them navigate the systems and the expectations. We work with parents to resolve any barriers to service participation. So if they need to go to counseling, or they need to enroll their children in school, or whatever it may be, whatever barriers those families are facing, we work together to help solve those issues. And we walk alongside the parents to support them through all these issues that they're facing. We can help assist parents in finding services such as juvenile substance abuse treatment, behavioral health services, education support, healthcare enrollment, SSI, unemployment, and DV shelters. And we can even act as a sounding board for parents that are going to be having difficult conversations with stakeholders. There's a lot of times that parents are getting ready to go to court or a CFT or other meetings, and they'll just call us and say, hey, I'm not sure, am I able to ask for this? Am I able to talk about this? And they're really unsure about what their rights and responsibilities are. So we're able to have those conversations with them ahead of time and let them know what their rights are, what their children's rights are, and what they can ask for and what they are entitled to. We can attend our parents and the youth at court and other case-related meetings, like I talked about, mediations or CFTs. And we stay connected to the parents. Right now with COVID, most of our connection is through phone and email. But prior to that, we were able to attend all the meetings and court hearings in person. And we're hoping that things will open up soon and we can go back to in person. Next. Our peer parent training. Our peer parents receive training on how to share their story. Boundaries are very important. Privacy and confidentiality. And most importantly, our peer parents are trained in trauma. Not only trauma that the families are experiencing, but also secondhand trauma. A lot of the work that they do could trigger some of the trauma that they experienced as either a youth or an adult, and which brought them to have these lived life experiences. So secondhand trauma training is very important. And we do this training through one-on-one group supervision and constant support. Next. This just kind of talks quickly about who we work with. We work with the juvenile court to offer family support. We provide support to parents and their children during those court hearings, either before or after. And we also invite our parents to our support groups, our training and ongoing parenting classes. We have different parenting classes such as Love and Logic, Circle of Security of Hope, Triple P, you name it, we train. And the way that we find our future employees is by working with these families. And when they graduate, if they are interested in helping others the way that they have received the help, then we bring them on and we help provide them the same training and support so they can go on and help more parents that come to us. Next. One of the ways that we help with juvenile justice system and the parents that come to us is we created a guide. We do have some trainings here where their parents come in and we'll just give them a handout, and it basically explains the process, what the next steps are, what could potentially happen, whether their child may be released or maybe they may be detained. But it talks about the different types of hearings, what the possible outcomes are, and basically gives them a roadmap so they have a little bit more knowledge and they could potentially know what to expect. Next. The purpose of the guide is to provide, like I said, information on navigating the system because it is overwhelming. A lot of the times when these parents go into court, they're smart and they are highly educated. But when you go into that court, if you're not sure what they're saying, we use a lot of acronyms, we talk very fast, and things move very quickly. So sometimes the parents are saying yes because they're afraid and they don't want to say that they don't understand what's going on or what's expected. So a lot of the times they walk out of the courtroom and they're not really sure what happened. So we're able to give them a perspective, kind of debrief them on what happened and encourage them to ask those questions in the middle of the hearing or ask the attorneys those questions beforehand if they are not sure what's going to be happening. We really help the parents focus on what the child's needs are and how can we meet them. What kind of services does your family need? What do your children need to be successful, so that we can see their children successfully transition into adulthood and not fear what their outcome is going to be. Next. This one just talks a lot about what I already talked about, how the parents, we teach them you are not alone. I know that sometimes you feel that way, but if you feel overwhelmed, if you feel shamed, if you feel like you're not sure what the next steps are going to be, reach out to us. Let us know. We will be there for you. We're going to work with you to meet your children's needs, what the rights and responsibilities are, what you're entitled to through healthcare or education or any of those other various systems. We also offer resources. We teach them about the child and family team process, how to work with the professionals that are involved with your children, and we also answer any questions that these families may have. Next. And this one is one of my favorite things. I'm going to have my coworker, Amy, who works at the court, talk a little bit about this, but it has been my absolute pleasure to be able to work with Amy through the court system on our dependency prevention staffing. So I'll let Amy kind of discuss a little bit about what it is and how amazing it is to help these families.
Well, thank you so much, Momi. I appreciate that. My name's Amy Stemke, and I oversee the Conciliation Services Program here at the Juvenile Court in Maricopa County. Just a little bit about Arizona. We're very unique. One of the things that makes us unique is we have 15 counties, with Maricopa County being the largest. We are the 4th largest county in the country, and Maricopa County has about 65% of the population in Arizona. So our juvenile justice system is pretty big, and our juvenile court is rather large. So a few years ago in 2019, we recognized this increase in what we called detention release issues. These were cases in which a youth was detained and their parents were unwilling or unable to pick them up from detention. What typically would happen is that the Department of Child Safety would need to become involved in order to get services jump-started for the youth and the family. And so we really thought, what if we could intervene with this family before the Department of Child Safety had to become involved? So with collaboration with our juvenile justice partners, we created our Dependency Prevention Staffing Program. We call it DPS for short. Our court utilizes law-trained conciliators or mediators as facilitators for certain events. I had an attorney recently tell me that she really saw DPS as this marriage between a child and family team meeting, which is that behavioral health planning meeting, and a mediation, which is a really kind of safe environment for folks to express concerns, and we kind of married them into a DPS. So in 2019, we began our Dependency Prevention Staffing Program. We recognized that for a lot of parents who were saying, I can't pick up my kid from detention, it's because they were feeling overwhelmed or the youth had unmanaged behavioral health issues. So of course the parent didn't know what to do. So in a DPS, most of our referrals come from probation officers. That's typically because probation is involved with a family. They can sometimes see some issues coming. And we created DPS really as a way to avoid unnecessary dependency filings. We use the word unnecessary because we recognize that sometimes a family does require the intervention of the Department of Child Safety due to safety concerns in the family. But we saw so many cases where the state was becoming involved just to get services for the family. So in a DPS, we really see it as another problem-solving meeting. So it's led by a member of my team, and typically in a DPS, we will have the family, of course, the youth. That youth's voice is so important, right? We don't want to create a plan for them or the family without the youth's voice being pretty important there. We also have someone called a resource coordinator. That's another member of my team who works directly with the family to help connect them to resources. And I will say my favorite person who comes to a DPS is Momi and someone from Family Involvement Center. We have found that for these families who are just so overwhelmed, having someone who can help walk through the system with them makes all the difference. In our DPS, the folks that are there are going to help create what's called a family action plan. That family action plan is going to outline the next steps that the family or service providers will take. That family action plan is agreed upon by everyone. It's not enforceable. One of the really key pieces of a DPS is that it is voluntary. So that means we don't want families being ordered into a DPS. There's too many court orders going on anyway, and we really want that parent to be fully engaged in the DPS process. So with that family action plan, it very often includes continued involvement with MOMI and Family Involvement Center. A DPS is a limited intervention, meaning we're really just going to have this one meeting to help connect folks to resources and help them identify other supports they may have. So we don't do ongoing case management, but we do help them create that plan. So when we're out of the picture at the end of the day, there are other folks there to help support them. One of the best parts about a DPS is really the focus on the parent. So often in the juvenile court and especially in juvenile justice, it's kid needs to change, kid, services for the kid. And while those are incredibly important, if we're not tackling what's going on with the parents or the guardians, nothing good's going to come out of that. So I'm happy to report that with our dependency prevention staffings, we've seen quite a bit of success. Like a lot of programs like this, it can be hard to measure what success looks like. We really see DPS as a way to support the family. So at the end of the day, if that family feels supported and has a plan, that's a success for us. I am happy to report that youth who engage in our dependency prevention staffing programs have much lower rates of violations of probation or new delinquency petitions, and we actually have avoided all unnecessary dependencies with our DPS families. So we're really grateful for that. You know, I appreciate Family Involvement Center so much. I can't speak highly enough about them. We utilize them in a lot of our different areas, but especially when it comes to DPS, because that parent has someone specifically for them. In a DPS, if the family is also enrolled in our state's Medicaid program, we will have a liaison from that healthcare plan, and that helps eliminate some of those barriers to services. So while we talk about services for the youth, that's a big part of our conversation and identifying those barriers. We're also going to find out from the family, what can we do to help you? Maybe there's housing instability or job employment issues. That's something we can help with as well. And generally we do that by helping connect them to Family Involvement Center. So we love DPS. We've seen a lot of success out of it. And if I can provide any more information, or if you'd like any support in establishing something similar in your jurisdiction, please reach out. We're always happy to help. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Momi to kind of finish us up today.
Thanks, Amy. Next. So I think I only have a couple more slides, but this one just talks a little bit about other cities and states that have peer-run supports. So not necessarily focused just on juvenile justice, but in the peer parent support that could benefit the families through all the different systems. Next.
Thanks, Momi. That's actually the end of the presentation, and we have time, I think about 10 minutes for questions and comments and discussion.
Fantastic. So this is Denise Solzbach. Thank you for the very active and engaged chat box. And I see that Judge Calloway is back off the bench. I'm just going to recap some of the Q&A that happened in the chat box for those of you that weren't able to follow along. We had several questions come in during Kaki's presentation about safe baby courts. First from Elizabeth, and it was confirmed that Safe Baby Court is not part of early Head Start, but the local Head Start programs are community partners and part of the stakeholder meetings. We also had it confirmed that families are encouraged to bring their supports to the table. That includes extended family, clergy, neighbors, and etc. Elizabeth also jumped in and responded to another question. The Safe Baby Court coordinators facilitate the child and family teams unless there is a DCS policy that requires DCS to facilitate a particular meeting. We also had a question about the random drug screens, and Kaki jumped in and responded, as far as the random drug screens are concerned, That is not the reason for removal, they do not conduct them unless there is a specific reason or concern that comes out through the case of the life of the case. So I'm going to flip back now to Judge Callaway, who is so amazing. She went to the bench, came back to the bench, and is picking up with our Q&A. So Judge Callaway, we had a question about family inclusion, a comment about family inclusion every step of the way. And how do you accommodate their schedule so that they're able to attend the hearings? Do you provide childcare so that families are able to make hearings and not worry about childcare?
I was just trying to type an answer for that, and I know we don't have long, but we try as best as we can to accommodate schedules. When we're setting things, if there's an issue that someone can't attend, we will try and move it around so that they are able to. We do most of our recovery courts in the not the evening, but 4 p.m. and later, so that people can get in a good days of work. We do some of our educational cases and truancy courts actually in the schools in the evening, so that parents can come, like you're going to a PTO meeting, you're just going to court at the same time. So we do as much as we can to try to accommodate schedules within, my staff's issues as well. So yeah.
Great, thank you. So you all also talked about and recognized systemic barriers. And so Linda had a question about, sounds great, but how are you able to negotiate those barriers?
So we did a lot of sitting at the table with different groups, the police, the schools, and saying, hey, we all agree that we want our community safe, we want our children to do well, and we want them to thrive. If we can have that same value starting point, we might see it differently how we get there, but we can at least have that same value starting point. And I was amazed at how quickly everyone got on board. It wasn't a struggle. We gathered, for instance, we had a lot of elementary students the police were getting called to help with issues with elementary students. And we all decided that was not healthy, that was not good. And so the schools, the police, we called mobile crisis and said, when these kids are acting out, it's usually something that has to do with behavior issues and not, or mental health issues and not behavioral, and that we need a different response. And so we all got to the table and we all said, we know this is not right, this is not healthy for our youth. How can we do it better? And we came up with solutions. And so literally in one semester, the number of youth that were arrested in schools that were 12 and under went from 75% down to like 15%. And so it was totally amazing. It went, the numbers, it was still like too high for my good, but it was definitely a work in progress.
Nothing talks like data. That's amazing. Great outcomes. So there's another question about, how do you respond to youth charged with status offenses?
And, if it's a status offense, again, the Tennessee statute allows us to determine who gets actually prosecuted or charged. Most of those things get diverted from our system, and we refer them to our DP2 program, our diversion partnership program. And so there is hardly any time that a status offense will come to court other than our truancy cases. And because we have a specialized Metro Student Attendance Center that works with them and works with making sure that we're removing whatever the barriers are for them not to go to school, all of the other status offenses are usually referred out to our DP2 program. And so they don't come into the court system.
Great. So this is my question, Judge Callaway. We have folks from all over the nation listening in, and I bet many of them are thinking, how do we get a Judge Callaway? So do you have any advice to the folks that are participating? How do you help encourage judicial leadership to take this very empowering, hopeful approach within their courts?
So it really comes to having the avenue to talk to the judges. First of all, most of us are elected. And so, when you were out in the campaign trail, there's a lot of things that I learned on the campaign trail, how people felt about juvenile court and the mysteries behind it, that I said, I have to address that when I become the judge. It takes, I think about Khaki and her role. One of the attorneys, the day that I got won the election, one of the attorneys reached out who knew me before and called and said, we need a safe babies court. Can you fix that? Can you do that? It was literally one of the first things someone asked me to consider doing. And they explained to me why Safe Babies Court was important, how it made a difference in the trajectory of our youth, our babies, and how, if we give them the resources that we can deal with it then. So it's about, we really are people. And if we can say, like, I have, when I run for re-election, I have good data now because of the changes that we made. And if you can show the judge, this is going to help you. This is going to help you be successful as the judge. See the stats, see what's gone on over this county because they did this, that, and the other. Show them how that makes a difference. We are people. We love our jobs. We love everything that comes with it. We love that power and authority. We want to keep our jobs. And so in order to keep our jobs, we got to do good things. And so convince them that what we're talking about is a good thing.
Fantastic. Well, that's a great way to wrap us up. And I want to thank our outstanding presenters today, Judge Calloway, Millie Sweeney, Elizabeth Breathe, Khaki Reynolds, Momi Howard, and Amy Stemke for sharing their expertise, their strategies, and jumping into that chat and responding to your questions. Thank you also to our interpreters, Jacqueline and Juliana. And thanks to all of you for joining us in this segment of the Training Institutes Live. We hope that you'll take advantage of the wellness break before you join the next set of workshops that begin at 3:30, and the chat is in the link. If you haven't registered for one of the 2 workshops beginning at 3:30, it's not too late, don't worry. The registration link is in the chat, and you can use this link to register for future workshops as well. Also, we would very much appreciate you taking just a few moments to complete the evaluation for this workshop using the link that will be posted in the chat. We do at the Institute take this feedback very seriously, and it'll help us shape upcoming workshops in this series. So thank you again for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you after the break on the first Thursday of every month for Training Institutes Live. Take care of yourselves while taking care of others, and thank you.